Truly, this is a man who needs no introduction. Steve Barnes, please.
Now, I'd like to tell you a story of three Marines. The lives of these three men, in their individual and collective representation of the essence of what it means to be a Marine, have inspired me for my entire life. I hope and I expect and believe that their stories will also inspire you. Their names: John Baslione, James Anderson, Kyle Carpenter. On 25 October 1942, John Baslione of Buffalo, New York, was a 26-year-old Marine sergeant attached to 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, 1st Marine Division. The United States was waging an existential war against Imperial Japan in the Solomon Islands in the South Pacific. The island on which John fought that day will forever be remembered in the annals of Marine Corps history. It was a small atoll in the South Pacific known as Guadalcanal. Pearl Harbor had just happened less than a year earlier, and the Americans were in desperate need of a land victory in the South Pacific, following the substantial destruction of the Japanese fleet at Midway a few months earlier. At Midway, the greatest naval air battle in world history, all four of Japanese aircraft carriers that launched the destruction on Pearl Harbor were sent to the bottom of the ocean. John Basilione's unit on Guadalcanal came under attack by a contingent of 3,000 soldiers of the dictator Hirohito's Imperial Japanese Army. Baslione commanded a section of machine guns which fought for 2 straight days until only John and 2 other Marines were left standing. By the end of the second day, the Americans' ammunition had run out, and against overwhelming odds, John held off the attacking Japanese soldiers, armed with only a pistol and a machete. The Marine victory on Guadalcanal saved the American naval fleet in the Solomons. And for his actions in that iconic battle, John Baslione was awarded the United States military's highest citation for valor, the Medal of Honor. If he had wanted to, Baslione could have easily sat out the rest of the war in the States. In fact, John's fame and heroism in wartime America in 1942, 1943 was such that the brass wanted him to stay in America, to sell war bonds, to make money, of course. But John decided to return to the war. He had to. John Baslione was first a Marine, and his sense of duty demanded it. So on 19 February 1945, the last year of the war, after 2.5 years of a steady and relentless degradation of the enemy since Guadalcanal, John Baslione, now a gunnery sergeant, again found himself leading a section of machine guns in yet another epic battle in the South Pacific. This time it was a battle that was to become perhaps the most famous of all battles in the history of the Corps. A brutal bloodbath for a tiny island that heretofore few Americans had ever heard of, an island called Iwo Jima. John's unit attacked the beach, and he and his men immediately worked to free a Marine tank that was trapped in an enemy minefield. John maneuvered through heavy weapons fire from the Japanese, and while bringing the tank through the minefield to safety, John was killed by a barrage of Japanese artillery shrapnel. For his actions on Iwo, John Baslione became the only enlisted Marine in World War II to be decorated with both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross. On 28 February 1967, another Marine, Private First Class James Anderson Jr. of Los Angeles, California, was a rifleman attached to 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines. On that day, Anderson's unit was conducting operations through dense jungle in Quang Tri Province, Republic of Vietnam. Their objective was to extract a heavily besieged Marine recon unit. James's platoon was the lead element, and very quickly, the Marines came under small arms and heavy machine gun fire. Anderson and his fellow Marines returned fire, and a hellacious firefight ensued in the close confines of the dense and unbearably humid jungle. During the heat of the battle, a grenade landed in the midst of the Marines, threatening Anderson's brothers in arms with certain death. Without hesitation and with complete disregard for personal safety, James jumped on the grenade as it went off, saving the lives of his fellow Marines. For his personal heroism and extraordinary valor, James Anderson became the first African American in American history to be awarded the Medal of Honor. In a ceremony at the White House, President Johnson bestowed the medal upon James's parents posthumously and in the presence of a grateful nation. On 21 November 2010, a 3rd Marine, Lance Corporal Kyle Carpenter of Jackson, Mississippi, was a member of Foxtrot Company, 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines, serving in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. During the Battle of Marja, Kyle's platoon established a forward patrol base in a small village to disrupt Taliban activity and to safeguard and provide security for the local population. Carpenter and a fellow Marine were manning a rooftop position when the enemy initiated a daylight attack with hand grenades. A grenade landed in the sandbag position that the Marines were occupying. Giving no thought to personal safety, Carpenter used his own body to shield his fellow Marine from the deadly blast, grievously wounding Carpenter, but saving his fellow Marine's life. For his extraordinary fearlessness and intrepidity, Kyle Carpenter was awarded the Medal of Honor. Kyle is our nation's youngest living Medal of Honor recipient. 5 years after the battle that left him so grievously wounded, Carpenter addressed his fellow Marja veterans at the National Marine Corps Museum, Quantico, Virginia. In a statement of breathtaking humility, Kyle Carpenter told these Marines that he wore the medal not for himself, but for all of them. In addition to the fact that Gunny Baslione, PFC Anderson, and Lance Corporal Carpenter all wore the sacred cloth of our beloved Corps, what did these 3 Marines, hailing from different parts of our country, of different generations, and of different wars, have in common? Let me see if I can attempt to cut to the heart of the commonality between these 3 men. First, they each knew the critical importance of allegiances and loyalty to allies, brothers in arms all. At Guadalcanal, the United States did not fight alone. Alongside the Marines were the forces of many other nations opposed to the Japanese emperor, as we were, including Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Fiji, and the Solomon Islands. In Vietnam, our anti-communist allies from the Philippines, Australia, South Korea, and Thailand fought alongside American Marines. And forces from Canada, Germany, the UK, Australia, and many of our other NATO partners continue to fight shoulder to shoulder with US Marines in the war against the Taliban in Afghanistan. Marines do not leave Marines on the battlefield, nor do Marines abandon the allies of Marines. Second, Baslione, Anderson, and Carpenter all knew that it was their duty to fight when their nation called upon them to do so. Like those impassioned revolutionaries who met at Tun Tavern in 1775, Baslione, Anderson, and Carpenter each knew that it was their duty to act, to answer the call. Evasion or phony excuses to avoid duty was never an option, never a consideration. These men, like all Marines, chose the profession of arms. And the duty of a Marine is not bounded by risk. Marines are trained to run to the sound of the guns, and so they do. And if you can't envision laying down your life to do your duty, then you shouldn't have chosen the profession of arms. And you certainly shouldn't have chosen the United States Marine Corps. Third, these men knew that they had to do what was required of them by the oath that they had sworn when they pinned on their rank and when they took the title of United States Marine. Each of them found themselves in their own unique set of deadly circumstances, but they had the means at hand, and therefore they had the responsibility to act. They all knew that what was undoubtedly their preference, to make it home alive, was completely outweighed by their mission and by their duty to their fellow Marines. Honed through countless battles over the centuries, it is this sense of duty that has brought Marines to the understanding that considerations of personal safety become irrelevancies when weighed against duty to Corps, country, and fellow Marine. It is this governing precept that has allowed this great country to remain free and to remain governed not by any autocrat or tyrant, but pursuant to the principles of our founding document, to which every Marine has sworn a solemn oath, the United States Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, General James Mattis is among the most outstanding officers that this nation has produced since the Second World War. Just last month, General Mattis quoted from an 1838 speech made by Abraham Lincoln, words spoken 25 years before President Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address in 1863. These are not my words. These are the words of Lincoln, of which Mattis thought the nation had an urgent need to now be reminded. Mattis said this because these words remain as relevant today as they were during the pre-Civil War age of Abraham Lincoln. I quote, "It is not the foreign aggressor who we must fear. It is corrosion from within, the rot, the viciousness, the lassitude, the ignorance. Anarchy is one potential consequence of all of this. Another is the rise of an ambitious leader, unfettered by conscience or precedent or decency, who would make themselves supreme." The progeny of those revolutionaries who met at Tun Tavern in 1775 have distinguished themselves across the centuries in such places as Belleau Wood, Tarawa, Peleliu, Okinawa, Chosin Reservoir, Hue City, Fallujah, Marja, and many more. Let us never forget those who went before, because only by acknowledging the sacrifice of those who went before can we fully understand what we must do to ensure the liberty of those who will succeed us. Thank you. Happy birthday, USMC. Semper Fi.